yesterday, ABC News and other legacy and mainstream media outlets broke the story that the president's sister has accused him of cheating to get into college, that he paid a man by the last name of Shapiro to take the SATs for him. She said that he's cruel, basically accused him of bullying, that he is not a reader, and just a whole long list, a plethora of things that are just demeaning. And I'm not an apologist for Trump. Never have been. Didn't vote for him the last go around by any stretch of the imagination. To some degree, I feel like I'm being pushed into a corner where I'm probably going to vote for him this year. But as the story broke about this, what is it? 15-hour secret tape where the president's sister did not know she was being recorded, said all of these things about the president. And of course, George Stephanopoulos of ABC News got a hold of this, interviewed the President Trump's chief of staff, Meadows, and I want you to hear this question from George, and it says this: "The president has denied this, but why would his sister lie about it in what she thought was a private conversation?" Now pay close attention to this second question that follows right after that first one. Does the president have any evidence at all to back up his denial? This is George Stephanopoulos. He's ABC News' chief anchor. And he just asked White House Chief of Staff Meadows to prove a negative, or to have the president prove a negative. That's not how this works. Proving the negative is not the job of the accused, and this is what the media has come to today. There again, this is not a commentary in defense of President Trump. President Trump is a big boy. He can defend himself. He's got plenty of people who he pays to run interference for him. But I want people to see how journalism has died in the United States. We don't have, by and large, whether it's print media or news media in the sense of TV, we do not have true journalism today. Now, I'm not talking about neutrality. I'm not talking about agenda-free. I'm not talking about biased-free. No one is bias-free. No one is agenda-free. No one is viewpoint-free. Everyone has a bias. No one's truly neutral. There's a news reporter out of the Twin Cities who does his level best and says, look, I have conversations with people all the time who after over 20, 30 years still come up to me and go, so what are you, Republican or Democrat? That's a good reporter. That's a good journalist. Is that possible for everybody? No, because I do think that your leanings, your worldview is going to come out. I make no bones about it. That's the entire reason why this channel exists. But the problem is not the bias. The problem is not the agenda. The problem is, well, the agenda can be a problem. The problem, however, in the way that journalism is handled in the United States today is that it is very much an attack dog. It is an attack dog. Journalism is used for the attack, and that's what George Stephanopoulos did here. But here's the more telling part of this. If the American people were paying attention, they would see, they would notice, they would flat out have to acknowledge that the media in the United States, for the most part, the legacy media, the mainstream media, is the propaganda ministry for the Marxist cultural revolution in the United States. They are driving this. They are force-feeding the American people information, and they're doing it in a way that appears to be journalistic, but it's not. If George Stephanopoulos were really doing his job here, there wouldn't be a question like this. He wouldn't say, does the president have any evidence at all to back up his denial? That's not how journalism works. That's not how accusations work. If the president's sister says something in a conversation, and now that gets turned over to the media as proof that the president did these things, and that's all the further that they take it, then the media has failed. George Stephanopoulos, good old Georgie boy, has failed here. And let's not forget, George is a Clintonite. George is very clearly a Clintonite. I mean, people don't seem to remember that. He worked for the Clintons. And Clintons have strong ties to people like Saul Alinsky. This is a Marxist attack mode, methodology. And so what George has done with that question is there again, as I said, he's asking that the president prove a negative. That's not my job. And while this is the court of public opinion and not a court of law, when you make an accusation against someone, you don't get to say, okay, I believe you beat your wife. Now prove to me that you haven't. I don't need to prove that. Well, if you don't prove it, then you clearly have beaten your wife. No, you've made an accusation. Now you need to prove your accusation, or what you're doing is slander. It's libel. And that's what's happening here. The president's sister said some stuff in a private conversation. The president's niece, who wrote a hit piece book on the president and the Trump family as a whole, now releases that information to the mainstream or legacy media, which is clearly a pawn of the Marxist movement here in the United States. They then turn around, take that as proof, make the accusation, and now demand that it be proven false. Why? Why? And at this point, everybody who is inclined to believe it is going to believe it. Everybody who's disinclined is going to not believe it. And so, did the president do that? I don't know. Does the president need to prove that he didn't? No, you don't have to prove the negative in the United States. And this is really kind of very common in the Marxist ideology, in that cultural revolution. Make the accusation, put your opponent on the defensive, force them to defend themselves, and prove that they aren't what you just accuse them of being, and then move on. That is a horrible, horrible way of conducting yourself. And it's playing their hand, and it's amazing how transparent this is. And it's also amazing that the American public will fall for it. Hook, line, and sinker. They will fall for it in totality. And it's a little bit terrifying. Because if this cultural war that we're in, and make no mistake, this is a war. This is a culture war. I mean, they are coming at us from every direction. They're coming at us from a constitutional perspective. They're coming at us from a religious perspective. Like, they're coming at the churches. They're working to silence churches. You name it, they're coming at us. That's what's going on here. You can disagree with me, but you're wrong. You're just wrong. And that's the tool they're going to use. Look at businesses and corporations who are now forcing their staff to take implicit bias training. Well, think about that. And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the connection here, Todd? Why is Minnesota Black Road Regiment, which is supposed to be about the Constitution and about Christianity and how those two play together, what is the connection between news pieces like this and implicit bias training and all of that stuff. How is there a connection? One, let's think about this. The media is covered under the First Amendment. Journalists have freedom of speech. They can pretty much say and do anything that they want, short of literally calling for a violent attacks on people, calling for their death. So George is covered here under the First Amendment. But what's missing, and that's why this ties into the channel, to Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, because this is a constitutional issue. But what is missing is that the American people also operate under the First Amendment. And while we have this innocent until proven guilty English common law methodology in the United States, which specifically addresses legality, criminal law, we have shifted to a French common law way of operating in our society, where you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And that's the methodology that's being employed under the guise of being protected by the First Amendment. Like, I don't get to slander people. I don't get to libel people. I don't get to say untrue things about people. And I don't even get to say things that I think might be true if it can do undue damage to their character but to their reputation, for no reason other than the fact that I'm trying to damage them. Okay? So that's what this hit piece is. This is the media working to do a hit job on the president, using information that they haven't verified and putting it out there, and now demanding that it be proven untrue, as opposed to assuming that it is true. And that is what implicit bias training is. It's what it is. We're going to make you take this training because you are clearly, as a white person, you are clearly a racist, you have implicit bias, and we need to train that out of you. Now, prove that you aren't. Well, any effort to prove that you aren't biased, that you're not racist, that you're not an ethnicist, that you don't have ethnic hatred in you, as a white person, when you try to prove that, you've now proven that you have it, because you're complaining that you aren't. And if you admit that you are, now you're guilty. And it falls into that philosophical idea of the Kafka trap. No matter what you do, you're guilty. There's no way around it. And that's exactly what's being employed here. This is a Kafka trap. This is an implicit biased angle. The president's guilty in their eyes. This is true. Now he needs to disprove it. And if he can't, well, guess what? You're disqualified. And that's exactly what they're going to use on you as an American person. These were the tactics of the French Revolution. They would make an accusation against you. They would have no proof that it was true. And when you couldn't defend yourself, or when you tried to defend yourself, they would say, "Ha ha, see, you are an enemy of the people of France. You are to be hauled off, imprisoned, and beheaded." And it's also been the tactic of every single Marxist overthrow, of every single republic or constitutional republic or even democracy in the Western world. It's always how it happens. This is not a conspiracy. This is true. This is how it works within communism. This is how it works within Marxist revolutions. Make the accusation, demand that the person being accused prove that it's not true, and then use their efforts to prove that they were wrong, that they're guilty. And that's what's happening here. And George Stephanopoulos just flat out played his hand, and he's not afraid. No one's going to call him on it. He's just not afraid to be called out, because the American people are just going to go, "Yeah, prove it, President Trump, that you didn't do these things." No, the burden of proof is on the journalist, and the journalist shouldn't be speaking until they actually can prove it. And this 15-hour tape, audio, of the president's sister saying these things isn't proof. It's not proof. What motivation would she have to lie? I don't know. I don't care. It's not proof. I'm not saying he's guilty or innocent. Couldn't care less at this point. What I'm saying is This is what we as the American people, constitutionally minded people, people who have a sense of this is not how things should be done in the United States, should be rebelling against this. And I don't care if your news source is ABC News, CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. Don't fall for this. Don't fall into this implicit bias angle. Don't fall into the slanderous accusations and then making your opponent prove the negative. Don't do that. Don't fall for the libel angle. Make journalism prove their accusations first. Otherwise, all you've done is you've caved into and allowed ministries of propaganda to manipulate you and control you. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.